Welcome to another episode of A Case for Cannabis. My name is Alfredo Mathew III, founder of Working World LLC. I am your host for this series, though today I have a guest host with me and it's going to be very exciting. But A Case for Cannabis, if you don't know about us, is an educational experience sponsored by the California community colleges to explore the intersection of equity, entrepreneurship, education, and workforce development in one of the fastest growing industries in the United States. This is a series that launched earlier this spring. It is going to continue through 2021 and beyond, and we've had an incredible first season. Over the season, we've had interviews with everyone from the president of Merritt College, David M. Johnson, to cannabis entrepreneurs, Claudia Mercado, David Ume of High Speed Technologies, and many others, Javier Armas, Bud Tender Education, and it has been a wonderful educational exploration at this industry that has experienced so much taboo and is experiencing a true transformation as we move towards full legalization in 2021. This series, as I shared, is sponsored by the California Community Colleges, who are really looking at this from the perspective of education and workforce development. I am very proud to be associated with this initiative, and we're going to continue exploring over the coming months. Part of what we're doing today, though, is we are looking back. We're going behind the scenes to explore how this came to be. How did I personally get involved? What did I learn along the journey? And where are we going next? As part of this, I have a guest host today. I brought into the studio 405 Live, a mentor, an advisor, someone that I tremendously respect, Dorian Johnson. If you don't know Dorian Johnson, he's an independent creative producer, educator, and entrepreneur. He brings a wealth of experience, and he is going to be our guest host today. Dorian is someone I just have a lot of confidence in, and I think you're really going to enjoy our rapport as we have our conversation. But before we get into that conversation, if you have not seen it, we want to share with you the quality of the production of this series. So check out this trailer with entrepreneur David Ume, CEO of High Speed Technologies, so you can see a little bit about what this series is about. Check it out.
Every time the game changed, I changed with it. I had to be like a mirror to the game itself, and knowing that no one can trick me out of my position, that we deserve to be here. I think just being open to trying new things, to experimenting, being open to failing and failing fast, being open is the key to opening doors. You cannot get caught up in what was or what should be. You have to be where you are right now. That is literally the key to success. And I hate that it sounds so simple. I really hate that, but it's the truth. I mean, I've had bank accounts closed. I've had processing pulled. I've had packages lost. I mean, you name it. I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I always wake up the next morning with a smile on my face because I knew as a black man I was gonna have to do twice as much to get just half of what the next person did. So I think that's been a big driving point of my success. I'm not gonna lie. Pain is beauty. Rejection is sexy.
Hello everyone, I'm Dorian Johnson. I'm so excited to be here with my friend Alfredo Mathew. I've known Alfredo for the last 5 years. We met while I was teaching and facilitating business development and financial literacy at the San Francisco County Jails in San Bruno. And I invited Alfredo up as a guest speaker. We both had a career with a company called the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, so we had a lot to share, a lot of synergy, and from that time, our relationship has really evolved, it's taken off. We've been there for each other both professionally, personally, and especially entrepreneurially. So thank you for asking me to be your host. for the day. And we were talking about this format just about 18 months, 2 years ago, right?
So what's funny is we actually, I only got into podcasts because I got with this brother right here at CoBiz Richmond about 2 years ago. We recognized that we wanted to get in the studio together. We actually got into the studio, and that's where I launched my original podcast, and that's what kind of got me the precursor here today. So I'm really thankful to have you here because he has been a tremendous influence on me and really helped me take that step, right? Doing a podcast, getting out there, interviewing folks, telling stories, that's something that's important to both of us, but it was really your encouragement that got me here. And so I'm really looking for you to help pull back the screen on what this experience was like and where is it going next.
I totally appreciate that. And so, so let's get right into it. I mean, this is one of those topics. You know, this is a topic that a lot of us are comfortable with, particularly those of us who have no real relationship with the industry. So how did you get here? How did you take on Case for Cannabis? What motivated you professionally, and what motivated you, let's say, philosophically? Why are you doing this?
Sure.
Why is this important to you?
So I made the decision to pursue this, and I think maybe some people who, well, if you don't know me, you don't know my background in education, my background with youth and young people. And some people might look at this series and just see the cannabis leaf and cannabis, think that this is a taboo subject. Why would you get involved with this? Because it's not kind of in line with my brand and the work that I've done. But where it is in line is I'm a big proponent of economic mobility and restorative economics.
Right.
I'm going to take that from you, Dorian. You taught me that word, but that term. But it's this idea that the economy that we have today is not serving all parties. And if we're going to have a more inclusive economy, we really need to look at all the different social, political, and economic angles of who has access to the American dream, to the California dream. And when I look at this industry, the cannabis industry, I'm seeing something that is too big to ignore, right? Cannabis has been around for a long time. It was around when we were young people. It was really demonized in the 70s and 80s and 90s. I think that there's been an evolution in the culture, but those of us who come, you know, from previous eras,
that's right,
we don't have this same, this same feeling because we lived through a lot of the hardships and we know what's happened in this industry over time.
That's right.
And so we just can't ignore what took place in the past, but this is really a moment to re-examine our assumptions about cannabis. And so I'm doing this series, and I'm very thankful for the community colleges for inviting me to do this series, not because I love cannabis. I use it myself. I have explored. I've done it definitely when I was younger. But as an educator, I was a teacher for 14 years. I was never a proponent of cannabis. I was never a proponent of drugs. I was a proponent of education and economic mobility. But this is a moment where I think we have to explore this industry. Well, and that's what this is about.
Let's talk about that a bit. So we're talking about the era that we grew up in, right? We've seen everything wrong, or everything that was promoted as wrong. We were reared in this industry being one of the great taboos. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, whatever that meant, that whole mindset. And growing up in the Northeast Corridor, in the tri-state area, we both experienced seeing the pitfalls of it, the demonization of it, what came out of the disco era and turned into the 80s crack epidemic, and then all of the policing and super predator this, and the RICO Act that, and this whole culture that came out of it, to now be at a place where even in the program where I met you, the majority of my students were nonviolent offenders in jail for drug-related offenses. So I'm still grappling with this idea of the industry, while logically and maybe economically it seems not to be such a big deal.
Yeah.
Why should a person like me change my mind, or what new attitude should I consider based on what you learned?
So one,
Right.
I would say, like, where did we meet, right?
Okay.
We met SF County Jail number 5 in San Bruno.
That's right.
I went in there, never been in a jail in my life, and I saw you teaching about 40 men between the ages of 18 and 60 intellectual property. You were teaching about innovation and entrepreneurship and about intellectual property, and that lesson struck me, right?
Right.
Because when I asked how many of you were interested in entrepreneurship, scale of 1 to 5, across the room, it was a 5.
That's right.
Everybody was interested in how to create a job for themselves. Many of them were trying to create a job for themselves, and they were trying to meet very basic needs, and that got them put in jail.
That's right.
So there's something that we have to explore about that era, right? The criminalization, the school to prison pipeline, right, of the 70s, 80s, 90s, right? California was atrocious in this regard, right, across the United States. When we're looking at cannabis, we can't ignore that era of how we got here. So that is something that's really important that we have to continue to explore. But my feelings about it growing up, I mean, I had a father who never did drugs in his life. Everyone that he knew that messed with drugs either died or went to jail. I've had family members who, have had substance abuse issues. My cousins who grew up in the Bronx never touched drugs because that was what it was. I actually felt a little ambiguous about my own experimentation, and that's why when I became an educator, I didn't want to use drugs because I didn't want to promote that culture. But I think that things are evolving, right? We're not in the 80s and the 90s. It's now 2021. The world has changed. Just in the last 5 years, California has changed, right? It is going to continue to evolve. And so what I feel is we need to explore this issue. We need to get involved in this. And when I say we, I mean higher education needs to get involved. Middle class folks need to get involved. Professional people need to get involved. If we leave this just to behind the scenes, a handful of folks who are very well capitalized, who have certain agendas, they're going to be writing the laws. They're going to be determining who has access to this industry. And I think that it's time to have a broader conversation about cannabis that pulls in education, workforce, entrepreneurship, the banks, all kinds of industry sectors. So that's what this is really about, is to create a space where we can have an intelligent, sophisticated, and complex conversation. Because this is not just a one-dimensional conversation.
So one of the things you make me think about is just the general state of drug use in the United States. And we all know that drug use across America is at an all-time high. And for the first time ever in this era, we're seeing people really begin to treat the use of drugs and substances as a public health issue and not a criminal issue. And so in that regard, I can totally see why we are reconciling or figuring out the compromise around harder drugs as a public health concern. That's also affecting the way people perceive marijuana, right? So it's almost like the whole spectrum and culture around anything that's considered a drug is being transformed. And we're coming off of a generation that has been really kind of the pharmaceutical generation. So what are your thoughts about that as it relates to marijuana?
Well, I'm not an expert, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring voices to the table who can really shed light on these issues. In the series, we are going to start looking at the medical angles of the cannabis industry. I want to speak with scientists who have studied the pharmacology of this. I want to speak with cultivators, right? Folks who might not be experts in terms of the medical profession, but they're experts because they've been working with this plant for decades. There's so much knowledge that is out there that we haven't been able to tap into or explore because it has been taboo, because it has been stigmatized. We have not done the research necessary to really understand the medical impacts of this plant, because it's been illegal to do this research.
That's right.
So in this series, I'm excited to speak with the folks at the cutting edge on the medical side and to look and examine at what is being done. Because right now, I'm not sure the total number of states, but recreational and medical marijuana is approved at perhaps 30 states across the United States. There's a very good chance that this plant is going to be legalized. It's going to fully move into the formal economy in the next year. So who is going to be doing the research? Who is going to help shape the story and the narrative around this plant that has been demonized for so long? And what is the truth behind the science? I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to say that I know about whether it's addictive, substance abuse, other things.
I mean,
we need to actually talk to the scientists, and we need accurate information.
I mean, one key point I'll make, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but I know we're not just talking about the drug in terms of consumption. We're really talking about it in terms of hemp as well, right? In terms of the use of the plant to create functional items and be useful in technology and such. Yeah. So it's really the whole thing, correct? Was your series really dealing with the hemp side, or was it more of the dispensary, agriculture to dispensary thing? What did your journey show you? What sort of things did you see?
So this is just the first stage of the journey. And so what's interesting is we really took a focus just on Oakland, right? We started where we are. I started with entrepreneurs that I knew. I started with some companies that I knew. Merritt College is a school right here who is developing cannabis horticulture programs. They're kind of ahead of the curve. There are numerous Bay Area community colleges that are now developing curriculum and pathways. And so really trying to start in our own backyard, but where this is going to go is to be determined. Right. We are going to be having multiple seasons of this series. We're going to be exploring folks across the state of California, potentially across the United States, or even global figures, right? What we're doing right now, this live stream, we're doing it at a studio in Oakland, but we could do this live stream with folks anywhere. And so I think that this series is really going to evolve. We wanted to start really looking at the equity issues and how this is playing out on the ground in Oakland with certain entrepreneurs, with the community college. But it is going to go, and it's got to explore hemp. It is going to explore the retail side. It is going to explore the hospitality side. It is going to explore the agricultural and scientific sides. This series really needs to explore all of these different things, and this content is going to be used in the classroom, in community colleges and other higher education. And we call A Case for Cannabis an educational experience because this is not just a podcast series. The executive producers are also developing curriculum, apprenticeship programs, workforce programs. It's really a multifaceted approach to develop the infrastructure for career pathways for an industry that has been ignored. It's been around for decades, but it's always been in the underground economy. This is the first time that it's joining the formal economy, and we're going to have formal pathways. So that's what a lot of this series is really about.
Just to touch on that point, is there anything significant or special about Oakland as it relates to the development of this discussion? Like, for example, I know that Oakland had the colleges at Oaksterdam, which was one of the first colleges in the United States, or one of a few really trying to create a true curriculum and industry standard around it, right? You have just its history. Was there anything significant about Oakland in this area that you think lends itself to, this national growth or movement?
I mean, Oakland is definitely the center of cannabis culture, right? And it's definitely black and brown cannabis culture. So this is an epicenter both of, the homegrown cultivators. It's an epicenter of cannabis culture. That's why, talking with folks like Javier Armas and, so many other wonderful people who came up in this culture, hearing their voices is really important. They're doing very dynamic things, which is why we wanted to put a spotlight on it. And I think that Oakland is going to continue to play a role. Northern California in general, is going to be the epicenter of this culture nationally. But if you think about it like first mover status,
Yes.
that can always be lost. So it really depends what California does. Does it really embrace this cannabis economy if it's going to maintain its leadership?
Right.
Because you can see a lot of competition from other parts, right? Silicon, just like Silicon Valley, is now Silicon everywhere. That mindset is everywhere. That Northern California mindset around cannabis is sprawling,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So it's changing.
So let's come back to our background, because again, as we stated earlier, you and I have a trifecta around community development, economic growth, and education, right?
Yeah.
And that is pretty much, that's been our pathway since probably after college, right?
Yeah.
Why do you feel this campaign or this focus and awareness around this industry is relevant to those three things? Community service, or community development, economic growth, and education. What do you see?
So, right, a lot of the work that we've been involved with, that I'm involved with ESO Ventures and Working World and my companies and all the work that I've done has always been about community economic development and empowerment. And so this campaign is very much about how do we ensure that people have access to this industry. This is an industry that is creating jobs. This is an industry that is going to create a lot of wealth. So it's a question of who has access to this wealth, who has access to this workforce. And we started talking about restorative economics. You can't have an industry that has existed under the table, that has demonized certain segments of the population and criminalized and handicapped huge segments of the population, all of a sudden get legalized, and there be a rush to capitalize and a rush to just say, hey, illegal, legal, flip a switch, and think that we're going to have a smooth transition. This is a rocky transition. So this is an important moment to be in this conversation so we can understand how to do this transition with grace. How do we make sure that the folks who have been most impacted by the war on drugs are able to take advantage of the redemptive qualities as we move to the legal formal economy? And in this series, I think if you check out the interview with Kika Keith from out of LA, that was one of the most beautiful moments and experiences that I had in season 1, is learning from Kika Keith, who's coming at this from a real community activist, a community perspective, but also as an entrepreneur. And she is organizing to make sure that LA makes sure that folks like her and her community have a seat at that table. And so that is like primary importance, that folks have access. The other idea is just economic development. There are subsidies to get involved in this.
Right.
There is a redistribution of taxes, and there is capital that is being put forward by both the state and eventually by the federal government to support this nascent industry. This industry, if it moves from the informal to the formal economy, is going to create tax base and tax revenue that can support education, it can support workforce, it can support communities that have been most impacted. So there's tremendous opportunity, if we do this right, to both empower business owners, create quality jobs, and generate the tax base that can support communities like Oakland, like Richmond, like Hayward, like San Jose, who, right, are all struggling, right? Without the support of the Biden administration, where would we be right now? Where would counties and local governments be without this infusion? This infusion of stimulus dollars is going to go away. We need to ensure that economies are being developed so that communities have the resources they need to grow and develop. So that's why it's important. And lastly, the education piece. The community colleges are supporting this with the hope that we can create more formal workforce pathways. That community colleges are the open access equity engines of the economy. Having community colleges at the table, creating programs, is incredibly important. It's going to take something that's been taboo, and it is going to professionalize it. It's going to mean that there's an opportunity for folks who have been doing this underground to come above ground and become career technical education professors, right? I know a lot of folks, they want to teach in the community colleges. They're developing curriculum. This curriculum is not going to be built by people who are not practitioners. It's going to be practitioners. It's going to help formalize this industry. And we know with formalization, there's going to become tremendous opportunities for economic growth.
Sure. So you mentioned, is it Kiki out of
Kika.
Kika out of LA. Tell us some more of your favorite stories. You know, what are some of the highlights that you remember that really stood out to you? I want to learn more about the people you interviewed, things you discovered, surprises, any sweet spots. Let's get deeper into the people you interviewed, and some of the moments that were created, more importantly.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll go to a moment right here in this studio. Well, one, it's just been a fabulous experience being in Studio 405 Live. You know, these are entrepreneurs that I met through ESO Ventures, and they're just like incredible hosts. But the first day, so one, it was my first time working with a film crew. So I have a tremendous filmmaker, Nelson Navarrete, who did the 5 film trailers and the podcast interviews. We're actually going to be working together again for season 2 in mid-July. We have another 5 or 6 episodes we're going to be shooting, and we're going to shoot again throughout the fall and the winter. But being on set right here in the studio with David Ume was really special, because he's an entrepreneur that I met here in Oakland about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was great to see his evolution. Seeing a little bit about how nervous he was, but also seeing how vulnerable he was about just how hard it is to be an entrepreneur in this space. You know, entrepreneurship is not for punks.
Right.
It's not for suckers. It is not easy, and I think that we often have a romantic view of what it is to be an entrepreneur, and we know that entrepreneurship is not just romance, right? Entrepreneurship is hard. You are going to get knocked down. You're going to have to do things that you didn't know how to do. But really being able to talk with David, talk with Kika, talk with Claudia, talk with entrepreneurs who have big dreams and big aspirations, and they are successful, but that success is coming at a price. It's coming at a lot of sacrifice. It's coming at a lot of sleepless nights. It's coming at a changing landscape of compliance. And if you don't make the right calls and the right moves, you can get knocked out of this industry. That has been one of the biggest eye-opening things, just how hard it is for people to navigate. And then meeting all of the entrepreneurs who don't have the capital to play, but they wish that they could play. So they're doing things around the auxiliary, right? Part of the ecosystem, but they don't have their brands because they can't, complete the licensing. They don't have, the capital to have the warehouse space, to have, all of the compliance requirements. That has been eye-opening. It's also been eye-opening just how many people actually really care, are involved in this industry. People that I did not know about that are I had no idea that this person who I knew in this context also works in cannabis. I think a lot of people are moonlighting, or they have a side hustle, or they have, they have a connection to the industry, but they don't talk about it or they don't lead with it because they're not sure how it's going to be taken by the mainstream. Right. So those are some of the things that have stood out.
Were there any particular sectors of the industry that you saw great success? Because I'm sure that the success and experience of the people you interview vary. Were there any of the people you interviewed really striking? And were any of your interviews people who were actually dealing with some serious challenges? Can you speak about that? Successes or challenges that you noticed?
I mean, everyone has their successes and everyone has their challenges.
Okay.
Like Kika Keith, she got started early, and she heard the call. She actually made a very courageous decision. She actually had, I believe it was a fresh pressed juice brand, and she actually had a deal with Whole Foods, and she was doing this national distribution, and she pulled back to pursue the cannabis industry angle. And so she made tremendous sacrifices to do this, and she has a license, but she's not able to actually use it at the moment. So she's putting a lot of capital out just to stay in the game for the hope of a future reward. And I think that's where a lot of folks are. A lot of capital is being expended. A lot of folks have had to grow. They've had to pull back because of the changing landscape, but they're staying in the game because there is a big future opportunity, and it really is, right? So much of life, so much of entrepreneurship. Can you stick around? There is no proven business model. That's what Rashad Johnson shared out of Ease. He's one of our final episodes. There is no proven business model for cannabis. A lot of people are coming into this industry who don't have experience. They're coming in from tech, they're coming in from other things. They're thinking that if they just build the business and they capitalize it and they buy brands, that they're gonna take off. It is not a sure thing. So it is very risky. That's what entrepreneurship is. You're developing a new market. So this is a new market that is really being crafted and pioneered. We don't know yet what all the winners and losers are going to be.
Those are really good points. Are there any other teachable moments you like to share with the audience that, based on your observation?
Well, I'll just share a teachable moment about creating a podcast series and doing it under COVID-19.
Yeah.
We had to set up all these shoots, right? We came up with the concept for this in fall of 2020. I've lost track of time because of this whole pandemic and everything. But in fall of 2020, we had a very different world than January 2021. January 2021, if you recall, was kind of the height of the pandemic, and I had to get permission from my wife to leave the house and shoot people out in the world. I was not going out in the world at the time. That was kind of a difficult thing, but the experience was tremendous because I love the feeling. Well, one, I just love people and I miss this interaction, right? So able to have that interaction, able to be with people in their space, go up on the hill to Merritt College, meet with Kika Keith at an Airbnb in Oakland, go to Claudia Mercalo's warehouse and her office space in Jingletown. That was really memorable, and I think that that's what we're going to experience in the future. I'm excited to go and see where hemp and cannabis are being grown, right? In where the cultivators are. I want to go and I want to see the retail spaces, right? We have some retail spaces, and we're going to be going and we're going to be talking with owners of retail spaces. I want to talk with people who are doing these kind of curated dinner parties, cannabis dinner parties. I want to explore software, talk with folks who are involved in the data side of cannabis. I want to talk with lawyers, people who are, exploring the legal ramifications of this industry and the compliance issues. There's so many different sides to this that need to be explored, and I'm excited to have a venue to go out and do that kind of in-depth exploration. And I'm going to try and do it, from an objective lens. I want to talk with people who are not fans of cannabis, people who, are very concerned about the legalization of cannabis and understand what their very appropriate concerns are, so that we can kind of shape the dialogue in an appropriate way. This is a complex issue, and I want to explore the complexity. I don't want to shy away from the complexity.
Were there any surprises? Like I said, good or bad, were there any surprises or things that made you take aback, that you experienced during this series?
I think it's just this idea that it looks like people are making money. It looks like, hey, this is a lot of cash-based business. There's just money, and it is very difficult to make a profit in this industry. It is very capital intensive. It is taxed. I think there's maybe 7 different layers of taxation on this industry. And so my surprise was just, it is not that easy to work in this industry. It's not that easy to build a brand in this industry. The taxation, if we don't get the taxation right, we're going to choke definitely all the small business owners out of this industry. So only the largest enterprises are going to have the capital to withstand what it takes to get started. So if there's a surprise, it wasn't a surprise. It's the same struggle in every other sector in entrepreneurship.
Right.
We have an economy that is based on, market, having a market leader, having like one dominant player who takes over an industry. And that is not what I want to see happen in cannabis. Right. That's not what I want to see happen in small and medium-sized businesses. I think that the United States, we need to do more to support small enterprises. We need to do more to support entrepreneurs.
Right.
And so that's not a surprise, but that is just part of the struggle.
Did you get any wind of any sort of, I guess, government or legislative discussion around this that is worth sharing in terms of what our leadership is thinking about?
I don't think cannabis is the priority right now, right?
Particularly with COVID and
coming out of
the aftermath and the political climate and everything.
But I think that it will become a priority. I think right now, COVID has reshifted everything, right? We're looking at progressive taxation for the first time in decades. We're rethinking the social safety net. There's all these universal basic income pilots. There's all of this focus on, inequality and how do we address inequality. And so as we're having this national, statewide, local conversation, I don't think that we can leave cannabis out of these bigger social, political, economic conversations, because this is an industry that can play a role in addressing some of the inequities. And so, right now, everything is very much focused on recovery from COVID-19.
Right.
The economy has been put on life support. Now that life support is coming off. And we've seen certain sectors of the economy have been doing tremendously, never impacted. Hospitality, restaurants, certain industries have been severely impacted.
Right.
You and I know small business entrepreneurs, sole proprietors, have been tremendously impacted. And so I think that we're going to see more programs, more supports focused on economic mobility for those sectors, and cannabis is going to play a role. But I'm excited to talk with policy leaders who are thinking about what should the new legislation be, what should the new approach be, but I don't know yet what that is. I think that more and more this conversation is going to move into the mainstream. So how is the mainstream going to react? Right.
So we talked about, you mentioned dealing with people who may be against. What other direction would you like to take this series? So you had this focus on entrepreneurship and some sort of entrepreneurial pathway. Where do you see this series going? What other branches of the conversation would you like to have?
I think that there's an opportunity. This industry is not just about retail selling weed. It's about law, it's about medicine, it's about agriculture, and I think that we're going to look more broadly at different industry sectors. Really, the future series are yet to be written. As I shared, we're going to have a new filming series in July. We're going to have another filming series in late September, early October, and a final filming series in mid-January of 2022. That means that we have a lot of time to come up with what these different themes are that we're going to be exploring. And because it's a new series and it's just kind of getting started, you, the audience, have an opportunity to tell us, what do you want to learn about? If you're someone who is working somewhere in this industry and you've got a very important perspective that you want to share, we want to hear from you because we can highlight your story or your perspective. If you're someone who has questions that need to be answered, let us know. This series is really about helping people who are on the fence or who don't know much about cannabis start to get involved. So what do you want to see explored on the policy side, on the scientific side, on the different business operations sides, because we're going to explore all those things. And we need to hear from the audience. We have not even done that much marketing or that much building out of the campaign, but that is going to be built out over the next few months. And our goal is, this is open source. This open source information that the community colleges, that others are going to have access to. But in the future, we don't know where this is going to go. There's going to be hopefully future seasons and future ways that we're going to be able to take this.
I totally appreciate that. Are there any other big ideas or discussion points you want to share with the audience that we haven't had a chance to talk about? So I'm curious, I know we're going to have some takeaways towards the end, but I'm wondering, are there any other lessons or things you like to share about your journey with this series?
I will just share, I'm still not 100% comfortable. Because I know that this is a taboo subject, and this is nothing that I've connected myself with before.
Right.
And I know that, right, if I post something on LinkedIn or I'm putting something out, I know that people might be looking at me and saying, what are you doing in this? I know you as someone who loves young people, who's a youth champion, right? You're all about education and workforce and support. Why are you getting involved in something that's taboo? And so there is a bit of reputational risk.
Have you experienced any of it, or is it just something you sense? Like, I mean, because it's one of those things, because it's a taboo, you don't necessarily know if people are talking, if they're not talking to you about it. What, like, has there been anything
right,
to make you?
It's a crazy world because, right, like, this is the first time that I've seen you in person.
Yes.
In a year and a half.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's like, you know, I haven't had that opportunity to just interact and be in public and be, you know, rubbing elbows with folks. So a lot of things are just being done via social media.
Right.
And you know that, you know, when something comes up on your feed, if it's cannabis, it's automatically, you know, put into a category and it's automatically labeled.
Right.
So I just know, you know, I've done a lot of work with corporate America, a lot of work with corporate brands. I've done a lot of work with educators, school district leaders, nonprofit leaders. That's my network.
Right.
That's not who is embracing this series, right? But that also is an audience for this series. So I'm basically taking some reputational risk to put myself in the seat where I'm saying, look, I'm taking a look at this industry. I'm talking with people that I really respect and care about. Everyone that I've interviewed is someone that I have admiration for. The entrepreneurs, the higher education leader, you know, all of the folks who are hustlers in this space, I respect them. I think that they have a valuable perspective, and I want to elevate them and give them a spotlight. Do I think that this is necessarily like the greatest career move, or do I have an ulterior motive? No. I mean, I love the idea of building out. I love telling stories, and I want to continue to tell stories, but I'm also clear that broaching something that's taboo is going to have, you know, it's got to be nuanced.
Right.
And so, you know, I embrace the complexity, and I actually want to explore the complexity of this issue. I don't want to treat this as something that is truly, you know, that's just a commercial. I actually want to be real and authentic about it. And I hope that my integrity, the integrity with which I've always worked with you and I've worked with others, is going to come through in this campaign. And my other thing is, I just want to get better at the technical aspects of building out this story, doing these storytelling. You know, we have a budget, we're doing a great job, but I think that with experience, we're going to actually get even better at doing the storytelling. And so in the coming months, we're going to take the audio, we're going to launch, you know, an audio podcast. We're going to take some of the text and we're going to create, you know, more blogs and more content. There's so many different ways this series is going to go, and I'm excited to be part of the creative process with a great team of executive producers, Xavier Nazario, Audrey Lebador, Fred, you know, from the community colleges. Very excited to be partnering with them and to meet great people like you and continue to build. So I'm just excited to see where it goes.
Well, even in terms of my own interests, not so much in the industry, but the implications, there's plenty of opportunity to explore the future of banking and capital development. Like, what does that look like over time? How do you evaluate this industry? How do you create asset that can be used for asset and wealth management, right?
Yeah.
I think even in my own work, through my affiliation with a company that does water irrigation technology, there's a lot of implications around how the agricultural industry can benefit, and or if there's any innovation or discoveries in technical or technological discoveries, playing with the marijuana plant that could be applied to other sorts of growth. Like I remember, being exposed to dome-based farming and vertical farming and all these different sorts of systems, or people having the right sort of, like I said, ability to grow, whether it's in their backyard or in any sort of piece of random land. Mm-hmm. So, opportunity zone development, if that's, I'm curious to know where those things are, and hopefully in future series we'll be able to see kind of the build out, like the societal social build out, right?
Yeah.
Cool, that's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Are we going to show a video soon, or?
Yeah. So definitely look forward to exploring that. Mm-hmm. Before we get to our final takeaways, right? Every episode we end with just a few takeaways. Dorian and I are going to have a chance to share just like our 3 takeaways from the conversation. I wanted to show you the final episode in the series. This is with Rashad Johnson, the government affairs manager for Ease. Check out this trailer, and then we'll come back and close it out.
All right.
I think access to capital is the most important aspect of getting into the cannabis space, because the more control you have over your entity, the more opportunity you have to serve your passion and the community that you're representing. Profitability in cannabis is an art that no one has mastered yet. I care about equity because for far too long in this country, we've tried to echo this sentiment of equality. And what we have to understand is that not everyone started at the same starting line. California currently, 75% of the jurisdictions ban cannabis. So that means 75% of the state has to figure out how they get access to cannabis. So I'm working on policies to make sure that all Californians have the right to get a legalized plant that most use for health and wellness purposes.
So that was Rashad Johnson, Government Affairs Manager at Ease. That is one of the final episodes that is going to be dropped on caseforcannabis.com. Please go check it out. And I always like to end these live streams with just a few takeaways. So my first takeaway, one, is I appreciated the vulnerability that being on camera with a friend, Dorian Johnson, allowed me to do to explore some of my own insecurities around this issue. We can't get into cannabis without dealing with our own psychology and the taboos of the industry. So I really appreciated being able to explore some of those personal things. 2, if I have those insecurities and those psychological barriers, how many of you have taboos? So how many folks out there are involved in cannabis as either a consumer, a producer, in some other way tangentially involved? You have family members, but you're not able to talk about it openly because of the mainstream pressures. So how do we start to have a broader conversation and feel comfortable to bring this important industry into the light so we can really surface the issues? And 3, how do we build this industry? How do we build the future of cannabis, appreciating the full complexity of its history? We cannot go and we cannot just shift from being illegal to legal, to being the war on drugs, to cowboy capitalism without some thoughtful discussion and analysis. And so that's really what this series is going to focus about: removing the taboos, fostering real, authentic conversation, and building the true complexity so that we can have, the future of cannabis be bright, be inclusive, and be restorative. That's where I am. What about you, Dorian?
Well, similarly, the issue of inclusion and exclusion has always been an issue for me, particularly with my years teaching vulnerable populations such as youth offenders to people in jail, to battered women, to foster care, those high-risk populations. Will those segments be able to benefit Could there be any sort of banking model that could extend itself to community, sustainability, investment, economic growth? I'm curious to learn more about the role of cryptocurrency and coinage as it's tied to cannabis. And I think lastly, for me to really reconcile my own taboos and resentment towards what I was taught was wrong about it. I'm more open to it. I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but I am more open to it as a result of your work and my exposure to this industry. So thank you for that, Alfredo.
All right. Well, that right there speaks to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, even inviting you to do this closeout series with me, I know that you don't feel that comfortable with cannabis. I have other friends that I really respect who they're not comfortable with this. And so it's really cool, one, that you came in for this dialogue, but that it helped to open some doors.
Some ideas.
For you, some ideas. So that's what this series is about. It really is about fostering a very authentic and complicated conversation. We hope you continue to join us on the journey. Season 1 is still happening. We got 2 more interviews coming live. David Ume, Rashad Johnson, you saw them on the episode. They'll be on the website very soon. These 9 episodes are season 1. Season 2 is going to be starting in late August. So we're going to have brand new videos, brand new live streams, everything coming to you after our little hiatus for the summer. We want to hear from you. Please do reach out. Please do check out the stories. Give us feedback on our YouTube channel. Give us feedback on our website. Sign up to stay informed and involved, and help us develop this narrative for this incredible industry that is going to be reshaping so many communities. We just appreciate your time, and please stay involved. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Take care.